In Limwood, a killer weaves murder with Tennyson's verses, leaving bodies and riddles. Can Miss Marple unravel the curse of the Lady of Shalott before the village drowns in secrets? Who wields the deadly loom? Chapter 1. The shadow on the loom. The village of Limwood lay nestled in a crook of the river Shalott, its thatched roofs and ivy-clad cottages basking in the soft glow of a late summer morning. The air carried the scent of honeysuckle and freshly turned earth, a deceptive tranquillity that belied the shadow creeping over the village. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the window of Lady Beatrice Harcourt's drawing-room, sipped her tea and gazed at the serene landscape. Her visit to Limwood was meant to be a respite from St. Mary Mead's gossip, but her sharp eyes, ever alert, caught a flicker of unease in the villagers' hurried steps below. Lady Beatrice, a robust woman with a penchant for dramatic hats, was regaling her with tales of Limwood's annual flower show. "Jane, you simply must see Mrs. Tuttle's roses this year. They're the talk of the county," she exclaimed, adjusting her ostrich feather, HEADPIECE. Miss Marple smiled politely, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically. "I'm sure they're splendid, Beatrice. Though I confess, I'm more intrigued by that young weaver, Ellen Carter. Her tapestries were quite the topic at the vicarage tea yesterday." "Oh, Ellen." Lady Beatrice's tone softened. "Such a talent, that girl. Her work is like poetry woven into thread. But she's been awfully reclusive lately." "Something about a suitor, I hear." Miss Marple's needles paused, her mind filing away the tidbit. "A suitor. How romantic," she said lightly, though her eyes gleamed with curiosity. Before she could probe further, a sharp knock interrupted them. The parlour-maid, flushed and wide-eyed, burst into the room. "Lady Beatrice, ma'am, it's dreadful," she gasped. "Ellen Carter, she's been found dead in her cottage. Constable Wren says it's murder." The teacup in Lady Beatrice's hand trembled. "Murder in Limwood. Oh heavens!" She turned to Miss Marple, who set her, knitting aside with a calm that belied the gravity of the news. "Perhaps we should see for ourselves." "Beatrice," Miss Marple suggested, her voice steady. "A clear head is best in such matters." The two women made their way to Ellen Carter's cottage, a quaint stone dwelling at the edge of the village, its garden overgrown with wildflowers. A small crowd had gathered, their whispers buzzing like bees. Constable Wren, a young man with an earnest face and a slightly too large helmet, stood guard at the door, his notebook clutched tightly. "Miss Marple, Lady Beatrice," he greeted, tipping his helmet. "It's a grim business. Poor Ellen was found this morning by her neighbour, Mrs. Pym, strangled, it seems, in her weaving room." Miss Marple's eyes scanned the crowd, farmers, shopkeepers, and a few curious children before settling on the cottage's open door. "May we go in, Constable? I'd like to pay my respects, in a manner of speaking." Constable Wren hesitated, but nodded, perhaps sensing the quiet authority in her demeanour. Inside, the cottage was a study in contrasts, cosy, with lace curtains and a hearth still warm, yet tainted by the chill of death. The weaving room, at the back, was dominated by a large wooden loom, its threads taut and untouched, as if frozen in time. Ellen Carter lay on the floor, her auburn hair fanned out, her face pale but peaceful. A scrap of paper was clutched in, her stiff fingers, its edges curling like a wilted petal. Miss Marple knelt beside the body, her movements careful, almost reverent. She peered at the paper, her spectacles glinting. She left the web, she left the loom, she read aloud, her voice soft but clear. "Tennyson, the Lady of Shalott, Lady Beatrice gasped. Tennyson, why? That's Ellen's favourite poem. She wove a tapestry of it last year for the church fair. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the loom, its shuttle still in place. The half-finished tapestry depicting a river scene with a lone figure in a boat. Curious, she murmured. The loom is pristine, yet the room is in disarray, scattered. Threads that overturned stool. One would expect a struggle to disturb the work in progress, but it's as if the killer took care not to touch it. Constable Wren scratched his head. You think that's important, Miss Marple? I figured the killer was just quick about it. Everything is important, Constable, she replied, her tone gentle but firm. The smallest detail can unravel. The largest mystery. She rose, her eyes sweeping the room. A small table held a teapot, 2 cups, and a plate of uneaten scones, suggesting Ellen had a visitor before her death. A faint smudge of ink on 1 cup caught Miss Marple's attention. She leaned closer, noting its distinct blue hue. Beatrice, does Ellen keep a diary or letters? That ink looks uncommon. Lady Beatrice nodded. She was always scribbling in a little book. Kept it locked in her desk, I think. With the constable's permission, Miss Marple approached the desk, a sturdy oak piece cluttered with thread. Spools and sketches of tapestries. A locked drawer yielded to a hairpin from her handbagger, trick learned from observing village maids. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Ellen's neat script. Tucked between the pages was a folded letter, sealed with red wax and addressed to my dearest. Miss Marple unfolded it carefully, her lips pursing as she read. My heart is yours, though shadows stand between us. Meet me at dusk by the willow where the river bends. It was signed TV. Lady Beatrice frowned. Could that be Thomas Vane, the poet who moved here last spring? He's been seen with Ellen, though they kept it quiet. Miss Marple tucked the letter into her reticule, her mind racing. A poet, you say, and one fond of Tennyson, perhaps. We must speak with this Mr. Vane. The village square was abuzz as they emerged, the crowd now swollen with gossip. Mrs. Pym, a stout woman with a penchant for dramatic retellings, was holding court. I saw a shadow by her window last night, she declared, tall, cloaked, like a ghost from one of those poems Ellen loved. Miss Marple listened, her expression placid, but her mind cataloguing every word. She approached Mrs. Pym with a disarming smile. A shadow, you say? Did it move with purpose, or was it merely passing by? Mrs. Pym blinked, caught off guard. Well, it lingered, I suppose, near the garden gate, then vanished toward the river. Thank you, Mrs. Pym, Miss Marple said, patting her arm. You've been most helpful. As they walked toward the river, Lady Beatrice whispered, Jane, do you think this shadow is the killer? It's all so theatrical, like something out of a play. Or a poem, Miss Marple replied, her eyes narrowing. The killer wants us to notice the Tennyson verses. It's a performance, Beatrice, and we mustn't applaud until we understand the script. The riverbank was quiet, the willow's branches swaying like a mourner's veil. Miss Marple's gaze fell on a patch of mud near the water, where a single footprint stood out deep, deliberate, and unmistakably masculine. She knelt, examining it with the precision of a botanist studying a rare flower. A heavy boot, recently polished, she noted, not a villager's usual tread. Someone who takes care with appearances. Lady Beatrice shivered. You don't think Thomas Vane? We shall see, Miss Marple said, rising. Let's pay him a visit. Thomas Vane's cottage was a mile from the village, a ramshackle place surrounded by wild roses. The poet, himself answered the door, his dark eyes shadowed with fatigue, his hair dishevelled as if he'd been wrestling with verses or conscience. He was young, perhaps 30, with a poet's pallor and a nervous energy that set Miss Marple's instincts tingling. "Mr. Vane," she began, her tone as warm as a vicar's wife, "we're terribly sorry to disturb you, but we're inquiring about poor Ellen Carter. You knew her, I believe." Vane's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yes, she was. A friend, a brilliant weaver. Her death is a tragedy." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, her eyes never leaving his face. "We found a letter, signed TV. It Schreisend System. It appears your message was cut off, based on the context. It seems you intended to continue the story or provide further instructions, since you requested a 2,500-word story for Chapter 1, and the provided artifact is complete at approximately 2,500 words. I'll assume you meant to continue the story or confirm its completion. I'll proceed by finalizing the story for Chapter 1, ensuring it meets the word count and adheres to your requirements for an engaging, non-repetitive narrative with a satisfying conclusion, maintaining continuity with the chapter list provided. The story will conclude with the discovery of the letter as outlined in the chapter list, setting up the next chapter without repeating any scenes, conversations, or incidents. A dear friend, I can't believe she's gone." His voice cracked, but his hands fidgeted with a quill on the table, betraying a restlessness that Miss Marple noted. Lady Beatrice, standing by the hearth, clasped her hands. "It's dreadful, Mr. Vane. The whole village is in shock. Ellen was so beloved. Vane's lips twisted into a faint, bitter smile. "Not by everyone, it seems." He caught himself, his expression hardening. "I mean, for someone to do this, it's unthinkable." Miss Marple tilted her head, her gaze as gentle as a grandmother's but as piercing as a hawk's. "You were close to her, I understand. Perhaps you could tell us about her last days. Any unusual visitors or troubles?" Vane hesitated, his fingers tightening round the quill. Ellen kept to herself mostly. Her weaving was her world. She'd been working on a new tapestry, something special. She wouldn't show it to anyone, not even me. His eyes darted to the window, where the river glinted in the distance. She said it was her secret. Miss Marple nodded, her mind turning over the word secret. A secret tapestry. How intriguing. And did she ever mention any disagreements with anyone in the village? Vane's face darkened. "You're fishing for suspects, Miss Marple. I'm not one to point fingers, but Ellen had her share of admirers and enemies. Talent like hers stirs envy, you might ask. The Harcourts, they've never liked her family, not since some old land dispute." Lady Beatrice gasped. "The Harcourts? Surely not. Sir Rowland is a gentleman, and Ellen's family has been in Linwood for generations. Old grudges run deep, Beatrice," Miss Marple said softly, her eyes still on Vane. "Mr. Vane, where were you last night, if I may ask?" Vane's cheeks flushed, but his tone remained steady. "I was here, writing. I don't sleep much. The Muse, you know." He gestured to a stack of papers covered in scrawled verses, many quoting Tennyson. "I heard about Ellen this morning from Mrs. Pym. I went to her cottage, but the constable wouldn't let me in." Miss Marple's gaze lingered on the papers, noting the familiar lines of the Lady of Shalott. "You're fond of Tennyson, I see." As was Ellen. A curious coincidence, that note in her hand. Vane's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his face. Note? What note? Oh, just a scrap of poetry, Miss Marple said airily, watching his reaction. She left the web, she left the loom. Quite poignant, don't you think? Vane swallowed hard, his fingers snapping the quill in half. It's her favorite poem. Everyone knew that. Maybe someone left it as a tribute. Perhaps. Miss Marple said, her smile serene but her mind racing. She rose, smoothing her skirt. Thank you, Mr. Vane. You've been most helpful. We shan't take up more of your time. As they stepped outside, Lady Beatrice clutched Miss Marple's arm. Jane, you don't think Thomas is involved, do you? He seemed so shaken. People can be shaken for many reasons, Beatrice, Miss Marple replied, her eyes scanning the riverbank in the distance. Guilt, grief, or fear of discovery. We must keep an open mind. They returned to Ellen's cottage, where Constable Wren was directing a pair of men to remove the body. Miss Marple slipped inside, her steps light but purposeful. The weaving room felt colder now, the loom's silhouette casting long shadows across the floor. She approached the desk again, her fingers brushing the journal she'd found earlier. The letter, still in her reticule, weighed heavily on her thoughts. Constable, she called, have you searched this desk thoroughly? Wren appeared at the door, his helmet askew. Yes, Miss Marple, just some weaving tools and papers. Nothing out of the ordinary. May I take another look? She asked, her tone so polite it was impossible to refuse. Without waiting for an answer, she opened the drawer again, her fingers probing the edges. A faint click sounded, revealing a false bottom. Beneath it lay a second letter, its wax seal broken but identical to the first dot. Miss Marple unfolded it, her breath catching. My love, the truth will destroy us both. Keep it hidden or we are lost. TV. The ink matched the blue smudge on the teacup, and the handwriting was unmistakably the same as the first letter. Lady Beatrice peered over her shoulder. Another letter from Thomas. Oh, Jane, what does it mean? Miss Marple folded the letter. Carefully, her expression inscrutable. It means, Beatrice, that Ellen Carter was entangled in something far deeper than a village romance. This letter suggests a secret worth killing for. Constable Wren approached, his notebook at the ready. A secret, Miss Marple. Do you think Vane's the killer? I think, she said, her voice measured, that Mr. Vane has some explaining to do. But we mustn't rush to conclusions. The poem, the letters, the untouched loomed there pieces of a puzzle, and I intend to fit them together. As they left the cottage, the village clock struck noon, its chimes echoing over the river. The crowd had dispersed, but the air hummed, with unspoken questions. Miss Marple glanced at the willow by the river, where the footprints still lay in the mud. A secret engagement, a poetic clue, and a shadow in the Nightlim wood was no longer the peaceful haven it seemed. Beatrice, she said, her eyes bright with purpose, we must invite Mr. Vane to tea tomorrow. I have a feeling he knows more than he's letting on. Lady Beatrice nodded, her ostrich feathers bobbing. You're right, Jane. There's something dark in Limwood, and I trust you to find it. Miss Marple smiled faintly, her mind already weaving the threads of the mystery. The letter in her reticule, signed TV, was the first strand of a tangled web, and she would not rest until it was unravelled. Chapter 2. The Mirrors. Cracked the morning mist clung to Limwood like a gossamer shroud, softening the edges of the village's stone walls and muffling the clatter of milk cans on the high street. Miss Jane Marple, wrapped in a woolen shawl, stood at the edge of St. Cuthbert's churchyard, her eyes fixed on the lich gate where a small crowd had gathered. The news had spread like wildfire. The village curate, Mr. Lionel Grayson, had been found dead in his modest rooms behind the vestry, his life snuffed out in the shadow of another Tennyson verse. The air buzzed with whispers of curses and poetic killers, but Miss Marple's mind was as clear as the bell tolling mournfully above. Lady Beatrice Harcourt, her face pale beneath her velvet bonnet, hurried to her side. "Jane, it's too dreadful. First Ellen Carter, now poor Mr. Grayson. The village is beside itself. They're saying it's the same fiend another poem was found." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. "Indeed, Beatrice. I heard the news from Mrs. Tuttle at breakfast. She mentioned a broken mirror. Most intriguing. Shall we see for ourselves?" They made their way to the curate's lodgings, a narrow annex tucked behind the church's ivy-covered walls. Constable Wren stood at the door, his youthful face etched with worry, his helmet now polished to a shine, as if to compensate for his growing unease. "Miss Marple, Lady Beatrice," he greeted, his voice low. "It's grim work again. Mr. Grayson was found at dawn by the sexton, strangled, like Ellen, with a scrap of paper nearby." Miss Marple's eyes flickered with interest. "May we?" "Enter, Constable. I find details often speak louder than rumours." Wren nodded, stepping aside. The curate's room was austere, with a single bookshelf, a wooden desk, and a narrow bed. A large oval mirror, its glass shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, hung above the desk. Mr. Grayson lay slumped in a chair, his clerical collar askew, his hands folded as if in prayer. Beside him, on the desk, lay a crumpled paper bearing the words, "The mirror cracked from side to side." Miss Marple leaned closer, her spectacles catching the dim light. "Tennyson again," she murmured, "the Lady of Shalott. The killer is weaving quite a tapestry of their own, aren't they?" Lady Beatrice shivered, clutching her reticule. "It's eerie, Jane. Why these poems? And that mirroret gives me chills." "Mirrors reflect truths, Beatrice," Miss Marple said softly, her gaze sweeping the room. The desk was cluttered with sermon notes and a leather-bound diary, its pages marked with a ribbon. A faint scent of lavender lingered, unusual for a curate's Spartan quarters. She noted a single candle, burned to a stub, and a smudge of wax. On the floor near the body, as if someone had stood there in the dark. "Constable," she called, "have you examined the ground outside? There may be traces of the killer's passage." Wren blinked, caught off guard by her precision. "Not yet, Miss Marple, but I'll have my men look. We found no signs of a break-in. The door was locked from the inside. Locked." Miss Marple's eyebrows rose. "Then our killer is either very clever or very familiar with this place." She opened the diary, her fingers careful not to smudge the pages. Grayson's handwriting was meticulous, filled with reflections on parish duties and cryptic phrases. "The forbidden gaze haunts me, and I saw too much by the river." One entry, dated the night before, read, "She came again, seeking absolution. I cannot keep her secret much longer." Lady Beatrice peered over her shoulder. "Who's she, Jane? Could it be Ellen, or someone else?" Miss Marple closed the diary, her expression thoughtful. "We mustn't jump to conclusions, but this suggests Mr. Grayson knew something dangerous. Let's see what the churchyard tells us." Outside, the mist had lifted, revealing the uneven flagstones of the churchyard path. Miss Marple's keen eyes spotted a disturbance in the dew-soaked grass near the annex window, a single footprint, smaller than the one by the river but bearing the same polished sheen. A woman's boot, perhaps, she mused, kneeling too. Examine it, or a man with small feet. Either way, someone was here last night. Constable Wren jotted this down, his pencil shaking slightly. You think the killer came through the window? But it was latched. Latches can be undone, Constable, Miss Marple said, her tone gentle but firm, especially by someone trusted enough to be let in. The village was stirring now, shopkeepers opening their doors and farmers pausing to gossip. Miss Marple and Lady Beatrice walked toward the market square, where a new figure had drawn attention. Clara read, a traveller who had arrived in Linwood a week prior. She stood by the baker's stall, her dark cloak and sharp features setting her apart from the villagers. Her eyes, bright and restless, met Miss Marple's briefly before darting away. Clara Reed, Lady Beatrice whispered. She's staying. At the Rose and Crown. No one knows much about her, but she's been asking odd questions about Ellen, about the church. Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her mind was alert. Then we must make her acquaintance. A stranger in a village is always worth a chat. They approached Clara, who was inspecting a loaf of rye bread with undue intensity. Good morning, Miss Reed, Miss Marple said, her voice warm as a hearth-fire. I'm Jane Marple, visiting Lady Beatrice. We've heard you're new to Linwood, such a charming village, though sadly marred by recent events. Clara's grip on the loaf tightened, but her smile was polite. A terrible tragedy, Miss Marple. I didn't know Miss Carter or Mr. Grayson, but the village is in an uproar. They say it's a curse tied to that poem. The Lady of Shalott, Miss Marple said, watching Clara's reaction. You're familiar with it? Clara's eyes flickered. Who isn't? It's famous. But I'm just passing through. I don't meddle in local affairs. Of course, Miss Marple said, her tone disarming. Though I wonder if you noticed anything unusual last night, near the church, perhaps. Strangers are often more observant than villagers. Clara hesitated, her fingers brushing a silver locket at her throat. I was at the inn all evening, playing cards with Mr. Tuttle. You can ask him. Lady Beatrice frowned. Mr. Tuttle, the butcher. He's not one for cards. He was last night, Clara said quickly, her voice a touch too sharp. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have errands. She turned and strode toward the inn, her cloak billowing. Miss Marple watched her go, her mind cataloguing the locket. The defensive tone, the mention of Tuttle. Beatrice, let's visit the Rose and Crown. I'd like to confirm Miss Reed's story. The inn was a cosy, low-ceilinged place, its walls adorned with brass lanterns and faded prints of Linwood's history. Mr. Tuttle, a burly man with flour-dusted hands, was at the bar, nursing a pint. He confirmed Clara's alibi, but his eyes shifted uneasily. We played cards till late. She's a sharp one, that Miss Red, won 3 shillings off me. Miss Marple smiled. How generous of you to entertain a guest. Did she step out at all during the evening? Tuttle rubbed his neck. Can't say I noticed. It was a busy night, what with the darts match and all. As they left the inn, Miss Marple's gaze fell on a narrow alley beside the churchyard, where a glint of glass caught the light. She approached, finding a shard of broken mirror half buried in the dirt, its edge stained with a faint smear of blood. Beatrice, look at this, she said, wrapping the shard in her handkerchief. It matches the curate's mirror. Someone carried it out here, perhaps in haste. Lady Beatrice gasped. The killer, but why take a piece of the mirror? To hide something it reflected, Miss Marple said, her voice low. Or to leave a message. The Tennyson line wasn't just a flourish, it's a clue to the killer's mind. They returned to Lady Beatrice's manor, where Miss Marple examined the shard under a magnifying glass. The blood was fresh, suggesting it was from the night of the murder. She recalled the footprint, the diary's cryptic entries, and Clara Reed's evasive demeanour. "Beatrice," she said, setting the shard aside, "we must invite Miss Reed to tea tomorrow, along with Mr. Vane. I suspect they both know more than they're letting on." Lady Beatrice nodded, her bonnet trembling. "Jane, you're uncanny. Do you think Clara's involved?" "I think," Miss Marple said, her eyes bright, "that Linwood's secrets are like a cracked mirror, fragmented, but reflecting a single truth. And that footprint by the church may lead us to it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, Miss Marple sat by the window, her knitting needles clicking softly. The shard of mirror, the Tennyson verse, and the mysterious Clara Reed formed a pattern in her mind. One she would unravel thread by thread. Resolution: the discovery of the blood-stained mirror shard and the suspicious footprint near the churchyard narrows the investigation to an outsider, with Clara Reed emerging as a key suspect, setting the stage for further inquiry in Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The curses whisper. The village of Linwood awoke to a sky bruised with storm clouds, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Whispers of a curse, fueled by 2 murders in as many days, had woven a net of fear over the cottages and lanes. Miss Jane Marple, seated at Lady Beatrice Harcourt's breakfast table, stirred her tea thoughtfully, her eyes tracing the steam curling upward like a spectre. The news of another death had reached them at dawn. Miss Agnes Poole, the village librarian, found drowned in the river Shalott, a Tennyson verse pinned to her shawl. Lady Beatrice, her usual exuberance dimmed, pushed a scone across her plate. "Jane, it's unbearable. First Ellen, then poor Mr. Grayson, and now Agnes. The villagers are saying it's the Lady of Shalott's curse, come to life. I heard Mrs. Tuttle muttering about it at the post office." Miss Marple's lips twitched into a faint smile, though her eyes remained sharp. Curses are often convenient explanations, Beatrice, when human motives are too tangled to face. "Tell me, what do we know of Miss Poole?" "She was a quiet soul," Lady Beatrice replied, her voice low. "Kept the library in order, always reading. She was fond of local history, knew every tale about Linwood's old families, especially ours." She hesitated, her fingers tightening on her napkin. "The Harcourts, I mean." Miss knitting needles, resting beside her plate, gleamed in the morning light. "Local history can be a dangerous thing to know," she murmured. "Let's visit the scene, shall we? The river may have more to say than the village gossip." They donned their coats and made their way to the river bank, where the Shalott wound through willows and reeds. A small knot of villagers stood at a respectful distance, their faces pale as they watched Constable Wren direct to farmhands to retrieve the body. Agnes Poole lay half submerged, her grey hair tangled with riverweed, her spectacles glinting forlornly in the mud. Pinned to her shawl was a sodden scrap of paper, its ink blurred but legible. Out flew the web and floated wide. Miss knelt beside the body, her shawl brushing the damp grass. "Tennyson again," she said softly, her eyes scanning the scene. The riverbank was churned with footprints, but one stood out a deep impression, smaller than the one by Elon's cottage but matching the polished boot from the churchyard. "Our killer is consistent," she noted, "and careless enough to leave traces." Constable Wren approached, his notebook damp from the mist. "Miss Marple, It's a queer business. Agnes was last seen locking up the library last night. Number 1 saw her come to the river. And that poem was like the others, isn't it? Very much so, Miss Marple replied, rising. But this time, the killer chose the river itself. A deliberate echo of the Lady of Shallott's fate. We must see the library, Constable. Miss Poole's work may hold the key. The Limwood Library was a squat stone building, its shelves groaning with dusty tomes and local records. The air smelled of old paper and wax polish, and a single lamp flickered on the desk where Agnes had spent her days. Miss Marple's gaze swept the room, noting the neat stacks of books and a half-finished catalogue card in Agnes's precise hand. A small brass key, tucked beneath the card, caught her eye. "Beatrice," she said, holding up the key, "does this look familiar?" Lady Beatrice frowned. "It's one of ours, I think. The Harcourts keep a set for the manor's old, wing-locked rooms, mostly for storage. But why would Agnes have it?" Miss Marple's fingers closed around the key, her mind racing. Perhaps she was researching something the Harcourts preferred to keep hidden. Let's see what secrets her desk holds. The desk's drawers yielded. Little, a ledger of borrowed books, a tin of biscuits, a spectacles case. But Miss Marple's nimble fingers found a hidden catch beneath the blotter, revealing a compartment stuffed with yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. She untied them carefully, her spectacles glinting as she read the topmost sheet. Dated 30 years prior, it was addressed to Agnes's father, a tenant farmer, from Sir Rowland Harcourt's father. "Your claim to the meadow is baseless," the letter read. "Vacate by month's end or face consequences. The Harcourt will not be challenged." Another letter, in a different hand, hinted at coercion. "They took our land, Agnes. They'll pay one day." Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jane, this is scandalous. My husband's father, stealing land. It can't be true." "It may not be the whole truth," Miss Marple said calmly, "but it's a thread worth following." Agnes was digging into old wounds, and someone didn't want them reopened. Constable Wren, hovering nearby, scratched his head. "You think this is why she was killed? Over some old land dispute?" "Grudges, Constable," Miss Marple said, "are like embers. They smoulder for years, waiting for a spark. We must speak to Sir Rowland. He may know more about his father's dealings." They found Sir Rowland Harcourt at the manor, pruning roses in the walled garden. A tall man with silver hair and a military bearing, he greeted them with a strained smile. "Beatrice, Miss Marple, what brings you here?" "I heard about Agnes' terrible news." Miss Marple's eyes, mild but piercing, met his. "Indeed, Sir Rowland. We found some letters at the library, suggesting a dispute between your father and Agnes's. Can you shed light on it?" Sir Rowland's pruning shears paused, his knuckles whitening. "Old history," he said curtly. "My father bought that meadow fairly. The Pooles were stubborn, claimed it was swindled. It was settled. Decades ago. Settled for whom?" Miss Marple asked, her tone as gentle as a breeze, but sharp as a thorn. Agnes seemed to think otherwise, and now she's dead, with a Tennyson verse to mark her passing. Sir Rowland's face darkened, but he met her gaze. "You're suggesting?" "I had something to do with it. I was at the manor last night, playing chess with Dr. Whitby. Ask him." Miss Marple nodded, filing away the alibi. "Of course, but secrets have a way of surfacing, Sir Rowland. Like rivers, they find their course." As they left the garden, Lady Beatrice clutched Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, Do you think Roland's hiding something? He's my husband's cousin, but he's always been distant. People hide what they fear, Beatrice, Miss Marple said, her voice soft. And fear can drive even good men to dark deeds. Back in the village, the storm broke, rain lashing the cobbles. Miss Marple and Lady Beatrice took shelter in the tea shop, where Mrs. Tuttle was serving scones and gossip in equal measure. It's the curse, I tell you, she declared, setting down a teapot. The Lady of Shallott's come for us, just like in the poem. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind elsewhere. Mrs. Tuttle, did Agnes ever mention her research? Anything about the Harcourts or old land disputes? Mrs. Tuttle's eyes widened. Oh, why? She was in here last week, muttering about justice. For the past, said she'd found papers that'd make folks sit up. Wouldn't say more, though. Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked softly, a rhythm to her thoughts. The letters, the key, the Tennyson verse, they pointed to a vendetta rooted in Limwood's history. But whose hand wielded the noose? Thomas. Vain, with his poetic obsession. Clara Reed, the secretive stranger. Or Sir Roland, guarding his family's name. As the rain eased, Miss Marple stepped outside, her eyes drawn to the river, now swollen and turbulent. A glint in the reeds caught her attention, a silver hairpin, its design intricate and unfamiliar. She tucked it into her reticule, her mind turning over its significance. Beatrice, she said, we must visit the library again tomorrow, and perhaps invite Sir Roland to tea. I have a feeling these letters are only the beginning. Lady Beatrice nodded, her face pale. Jane, you're unravelling something dreadful. I can feel it. Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her eyes gleamed with purpose. Dreadful or not, Beatrice, the truth is like a river. It cannot be stopped. Resolution, the discovery of the hidden letters in Anna's desk reveals a decades-old Harcourt scandal, suggesting a motive of vengeance and pointing suspicion towards Sir Roland, while the hairpin and footprint deepen the mystery, setting the stage for Chapter 4. Chapter 4. The night's shadow, the rain had retreated, leaving Limwood bathed in a fragile sunlight that gilded the rooftops and sparkled on the wet cobbles. Yet the village's heart beat uneasily, its rhythm disrupted by 3 murders in as many days, each marked by the ghostly echo of Tennyson's The Lady of Shalott. Miss Jane Marple, seated in Lady Beatrice Harcourt's conservatory, peered through the glass at the rolling meadows beyond, her knitting needles idle for once. Her mind, however, was anything but still, weaving together the threads of Ellen Carter's strangulation, Mr. Grayson's death by the shattered mirror, and Agnes Poole's drowning in the River Dot. Lady Beatrice, her hands fluttering like startled birds, poured tea with a clatter. Jane, the village is in a panic. Mrs. Pym swears she saw a cloaked figure by the church last night, and now this Sir Roland attacked. It's a miracle he's alive. Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, met Lady Beatrice's. A miracle, perhaps, or a miscalculation. Tell me, Beatrice, what exactly happened to Sir Roland? He was found this morning in the orchard, Lady Beatrice said, her voice trembling. Stabbed, but not fatally, thank heavens. He was clutching a note, another of those wretched Tennyson lines. Constable Wren is with him now at the manor. Miss Marple set her teacup down, her expression serene but alert. Then we must pay Sir Roland a visit. An attack that fails to kill is as telling as one that succeeds. They arrived at Harcourt Manor, its stone facade looming under the fitful sun. Constable Wren met them at the door, his face flushed with the strain of a case spiralling beyond his grasp. Miss Marple, Lady Beatrice, Sir Rowland's in the library. He's shaken but talking. Says he didn't see his attacker, only felt the blade and heard a rustling in the trees. The library was a grand room, its shelves lined with leather-bound volumes and its windows overlooking the orchard. Sir Rowland sat by the fire, a bandage across his shoulder, his silver hair dishevelled but his eyes defiant. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice gruff, "I suppose you're here to poke into my affairs again. I told Wren everything I was, pruning in the orchard at dawn when someone struck from behind. I woke to find this pinned to my coat." He handed her a crumpled paper. Miss Marple unfolded it, reading aloud, a bow shot from her bower reeves. Her lips pursed. Tennyson, as expected. The killer is fond of theatrics, choosing a line that evokes a knight's pursuit. But why? "Spare you, Sir Rowland." He bristled, his hand tightening on his cane. "Spare me, I fought back, that's why. I may be old, but I'm no weakling. Whoever it was fled when I shouted." Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the bandage, noting its neatness. A shallow wound, then, curious. "May I see the coat?" Sir Rowland gestured to a chair, where a tweed jacket lay, its lapel stained with blood. Pinned to it was the Tennyson note, its edges torn as if hastily affixed. Miss Marple examined the fabric, her fingers brushing a faint smear of soil-not orchard dirt, but a clay-like residue, reddish and distinct. "This soil isn't from your orchard, Sir Rowland," she said. "It's from the riverbank, near where Agnes was found." Constable Wren's eyes widened. "You think the attacker came from the river, but why attack Sir Rowland at all?" "Perhaps to silence him," Miss Marple said softly, "or to warn him. Sir Rowland, you mentioned a land dispute with Agnes's family. Was there anyone else involved? Someone who might hold a grudge?" Sir Rowland's jaw tightened. "That was my father's doing, not mine. The Pooles were tenants, always stirring trouble. There was another family, the Reeds. They claimed a stake in the meadow too, but they left Limwood years ago, Reeds." Lady Beatrice's voice rose, like Clara Reed, the stranger at the inn. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Indeed, a connection worth exploring. But first, let's visit the orchard. The scene of an attack often speaks louder than its victim. The orchard lay behind the manor, its apple trees heavy with fruit, their branches casting dappled shadows. Miss Marple moved with quiet purpose, her eyes scanning the ground. Near a gnarled tree, where Sir Rowland claimed he'd been struck, she spotted a glint of metal half buried in the grass. She knelt, retrieving a silver locket, its surface engraved with the initials C. The clasp was broken, as if torn off in a struggle. "Beatrice," she said, holding up the locket, "this isn't Sir Rowland's, I presume." Lady Beatrice shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, Jane. Could it be Clara Reed's? She wears a locket like that. Ty saw it at the market." Miss Marple tucked the locket into her reticule, her mind racing. "Constable, have your men search for a knife. The attacker may have dropped it in their haste." Wren nodded, signalling to a young officer. "Right away, Miss Marple, do." "You think Miss Reed did this?" "She's an outsider, not the sort to know Tennyson so well." "Outsiders can learn a village's secrets quickly," Miss Marple replied, "especially if they have a personal stake. We must speak to her." They found Clara Reed at the Rose and Crown, sitting alone in the tap room, a book of poetry open before her. Her dark cloak was draped over a chair, and her fingers toyed with a glass of cider, though she hadn't drunk a sip. She looked up as Miss Marple and Lady Beatrice approached, her expression guarded. "Miss Reed," Miss Marple began, her tone as warm as a vicar's wife. "We've had another incident. Sir Rowland Harcourt was attacked this morning. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Clara's hand froze on the glass, her eyes narrowing. "Me? I was here all night, as Mr. Tuttle can tell you. Why would I attack Sir Rowland?" Miss Marple produced the locket, holding it delicately. "This was found in the orchard. The initials suggest it might be yours." Clara's face paled, her fingers brushing her throat where the locket no longer hung. I must have lost it yesterday. I was walking near the manor, gathering wildflowers. It's an heirloom from my mother." "A curious place to lose an heirloom," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle but probing. "And your They from Linwood." Sir Rowland mentioned a Reed family involved in an old dispute. Clara's lips tightened, but she met Miss Marple's gaze. "My family left Linwood before I was born. I'm here to see the countryside, nothing more. If you think I'm a killer, you're mistaken." Lady Beatrice, unable to contain herself, blurted, "But the locket, Clara. And you've been asking about Ellen and Agnes." Clara stood, her chair scraping the floor. "I ask questions because I'm curious, not because I'm guilty. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a train to catch tomorrow." She swept her cloak over her shoulder and left the taproom, her steps brisk. Miss Marple watched her go, her mind cataloguing the locket, the clay-stained coat, and Clara's defensiveness. "Beatrice, we must confirm her alibi with Mr. Tuttle again. And I'd like to see Sir Rowland's chess partner, Dr. Whitby." They found Dr. Whitby at his surgery, a cluttered room smelling of antiseptic and pipe smoke. The doctor, a wiry man, with a nervous laugh, confirmed Sir Rowland's alibi. "We played chess till midnight," he said, polishing his spectacles. Rowland was in fine spirits, though he mentioned some worry about old family matters. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes noting a pair of polished boots by the door, their soles caked with reddish clay. "Thank you, Doctor. You've been most helpful." As they returned to the manor, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the village. Miss Marple paused by the orchard gate, her gaze lingering on the tree where the locket was found. "Beatrice," she said, "the killer is playing a dangerous game, leaving clues like breadcrumbs. This locket ties Clara to the attack, but the clay on Sir Rowland's coat suggests another player, someone who knows the riverbank well." Lady Beatrice shivered. "Jane, you make it sound like a conspiracy. Could Clara and someone else be working together?" "Possibly," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but firm. "The Tennyson verses are a signature, but the motives are personal. We must invite Clara and Sir Rowland to tea tomorrow with Thomas Vane. Their reactions may tell us more than their words." As they walked back to the manor, the village clock chimed, its notes swallowed by the gathering dusk. Miss Marple's reticule held the locket, a tangible link to Clara Reed. But her mind was already tracing the invisible threads connecting the river, the orchard, and the poet's cryptic verses. Resolution. The discovery of the locket engraved with Clara Reed's initials links her to the attack on Sir Rowland, casting suspicion on her motives and deepening the mystery, while the clay-stained coat suggests another culprit, setting the stage for Chapter 5. Chapter 5. The weavers thread the afternoon sun cast a golden haze over Linwood, softening the sharp edges of the village's grief. For days had passed since Ellen Carter's murder, followed by the deaths of Mr. Grayson and Agnes Poole, and the near-fatal attack on Sir Rowland Harcourt. The villagers, huddled in their homes or whispering in the market, spoke of a curse woven from Tennyson's The Lady of Shalott. Miss Jane Marple, seated in Lady Beatrice Harcourt's drawing room, arranged her teacups with precision, her mind as sharp as the bone china. Today's tea was no mere social. Colshe had invited Clara Reed and Thomas Vane, hoping their presence would unravel another thread of the mystery. Lady Beatrice, her nerves frayed like old lace, adjusted her pearl brooch. "Jane, are you sure about this? Clara's so secretive, and Thomas, well, he's been a ghost since Ellen's death. What if they suspect we're prying?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Prying, Beatrice, is merely observation with purpose. People reveal themselves when they're uncomfortable. Now, let's ensure the scones are fresh." The doorbell chimed, and Clara Reed entered first, her dark cloak replaced by a simple grey dress, though her eyes remained wary. Thomas Vane followed, his poet's pallor more pronounced, his hands clutching a worn notebook. The air grew taut as they sat, the clink of teacups the only sound for a moment. "Miss Reed." "Mr. Vane," Miss Marple began, her voice warm as a hearth, "thank you for joining us. Linwood has seen such sorrow lately, and I thought a quiet tea might lift our spirits. You both knew Ellen Carter, I believe." Clara's fingers tightened on her cup, her locket now absent from her throat. "I met her once, at the market. She seemed kind, but we weren't close." Thomas's jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the floor. Ellen was everything. Her weaving was poetry in thread. "I can't believe she's gone." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze gentle but piercing. Her talent was remarkable. "I understand she was working on a special tapestry before her death. Mr. Vane, did she ever show it to you?" He shook his head, a lock of dark hair falling over his brow. "She kept it hidden, said it was personal. I respected that." Clara's lips parted as if to speak, but she sipped her tea instead. Miss Marple noted the hesitation, filing it away. "And you, Miss Reed, you've been seen near Ellen's cottage. Did you ever visit her weaving room?" Clara's eyes flashed, but her voice was steady. "I admired her work from afar. I'm a traveller, Miss Marple, not a villager with grudges. I had no reason to harm her or anyone." Lady Beatrice, unable to resist, leaned forward. "But your locket, Clara. It was found in the orchard after Sir Rowland's attack." Clara's cup rattled in its saucer. "I told you, I lost it while walking. I'm not a criminal for misplacing an heirloom." Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her mind was a loom, weaving patterns from their words. "Of course, Miss Reed, though it's curious how heirlooms turn up in such telling places. Perhaps you'd allow me to visit your lodgings. I'm fond of tapestries myself, and I hear you have one of note." Clara hesitated, then nodded curtly. "If you must, I'm at the Rose and Crown, room 3, but you'll find nothing but thread and cloth." The conversation shifted to village matters, but Miss Marple's attention lingered on Thomas's notebook, its pages bristling with paper scraps. As he reached for a scone, a loose sheet slipped out, bearing a single line. She saw the helmet and the plume. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but she kept her expression bland, passing the sugar bowl after tea. Miss Marple and Lady Beatrice made their way to the Rose and Crown, the village streets quiet under a sky streaked with clouds. Clara's room was sparse, its only adornment a half-finished tapestry on a small loom by the window. The fabric depicted a knight in armour, his plume vivid against a stormy sky, the threads shimmering with an almost unearthly glow. Lady Beatrice gasped, "Jane, it's beautiful, but so haunting. Like something from Tennyson's poem." Miss Marple approached the tapestry, her fingers tracing the intricate stitches. Indeed, Beatrice. And look here, she pointed to a corner, where the threads formed a subtle pattern, almost invisible. A sequence of knots and loops, unlike the rest of the design. This isn't decoration. It's a code. Clara, who had followed them, froze in the doorway. It's just a tapestry, Miss Marple. You're seeing things that aren't there, are we? Miss Marple's voice was soft, but her eyes locked onto Clara's. These knots resemble a cipher I once saw in St. Mary Mead, used by a smuggler to mark meeting places. Perhaps you could explain it. Clara's face hardened, but she shrugged. I learned weaving from my mother. She liked patterns. That's all. Miss Marple noted the lie in Clara's too quick reply, but she smiled. Of course, we won't keep you. Thank you for indulging an old woman's curiosity. As they left the inn, Lady Beatrice clutched Miss Marple's arm. Jane, a code. Do you think Clara's hiding something sinister? Sinister or not, Beatrice, she's hiding something, Miss Marple said, her reticule heavy with the weight of the locket and hairpin from earlier discoveries. We must decipher that code, but discreetly. Let's visit the library. Agnes may have left notes on ciphers. The library, still shadowed by Agnes Poole's death, felt colder now, its shelves looming like silent witnesses. Miss Marple searched the catalogue, finding a slim volume on local folklore tucked behind a row of novels. Its pages were marked with Agnes's handwriting, detailing old weaving traditions and their use in coded messages. One passage described a knot-based cipher, used by Limwood's weavers to pass secrets during land disputes a century ago. Beatrice, Miss Marple said, her voice low, this confirms it. Clara's tapestry holds a message, likely a meeting place or time. We must return to her room tonight, when she's out. Lady Beatrice's eyes widened. Tonight. Jane, that's breaking. And entering, merely observing. My dear, Miss Marple said, her smile mischievous. We'll be careful. Under cover of dusk, they slipped back to the Rose and Crown. The village hushed, save for the distant hoot of an owl. Clara was absent, attending a darts match in the tap-room, her alibi confirmed by a passing barmaid. Miss Marple's hairpin made short work of the room's lock, and they entered. The tapestry glowing faintly in the moonlight, Miss Marple examined the knots, her fingers deft as she counted and traced their sequence. It's a simple substitution, she murmured. Each knot represents a letter. Let's see. She jotted notes on a scrap of paper, her brow furrowed. After a moment, she deciphered the message. Mill, midnight. Trust no one. Lady Beatrice gasped. The old mill, that's abandoned. Who's she meeting? Someone who shares her secrets, Miss Marple said, folding the paper. We must tell Constable Wren, but not yet. We need proof of Clara's intent. As they left the room, a creak on the stairs made them freeze. Miss Marple pulled Lady Beatrice into the shadows, her heart steady despite the danger. A figure passed Thomas Vane, his notebook clutched tightly, his eyes darting toward Clara's door. He knocked softly, then, receiving no answer, slipped a note under the door and hurried away. Miss Marple waited until his footsteps faded, then retrieved the note. It read, I know what you seek. Meet me at the mill. TV. Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her mouth. Jane, Thomas, and Clara there in league. But why? Not in league, perhaps, Miss Marple said, her voice calm but firm, but connected. This note suggests Thomas knows Clara's purpose, or suspects it. The mill is our next step. They returned to the manor, the night now thick with stars. Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting resumed, though her mind was far from idle. The tapestry's code, Thomas's note, and Clara's evasiveness formed a pattern, one that pointed to the old mill as the heart of the mystery. "Beatrice," she said, her needles clicking rhythmically, "we must arrange another tea tomorrow, but first we'll visit the mill at midnight. I suspect we'll find more than shadows there." Lady Beatrice nodded, her face pale. "Jane, you're fearless. But what if the killer's there? Then—" "We'll be ready," Miss Marple said, her eyes bright with purpose. "The weaver's thread is leading us to the truth, and I intend to follow it." Resolution, the discovery of the coded message in Clara's tapestry, pointing to a secret meeting at the old mill, deepens suspicion of her involvement and suggests a connection with Thomas Vane, setting the stage for a confrontation in Chapter 6. Chapter 6. The River's Secret. The moon hung low over Limwood, its silver light trembling on the river Shallot's restless surface. The village, cloaked in the stillness of midnight, seemed to hold its breath as Miss Jane, Marple, and Lady Beatrice Harcourt crept toward the old mill, its derelict silhouette looming against the star-strewn sky. The air was sharp with the scent of damp moss and rotting wood, a stark contrast to the cosy parlours and tea-rooms where Miss Marple had unravelled the threads of 4 violent acts: Ellen Carter's murder, Mr. Grayson's strangulation, Agnes Poole's drowning, and Sir Rowland Harcourt's near-fatal stabbing. Each crime bore the mark of Tennyson's The Lady of Shalott, and tonight, guided by the coded message in Clara Reed's tapestry, Miss Marple sought answers at the mill. Lady Beatrice clutched her cloak, her voice a whisper. "Jane, this place gives me the shivers. That code, mill, midnight. Trust no one. It's like something out of a Gothic novel. Are you sure we shouldn't have brought Constable Wren?" Miss Marple's eyes, keen despite the darkness, scanned the mill's crumbling walls. "Constables are useful, Beatrice, but they lack subtlety. We need to see who comes before we sound the alarm. Stay close and keep quiet." They hid behind a tangle of brambles, the mill's broken wheel creaking faintly in the current. The coded message from Clara's tapestry, coupled with Thomas Vane's note slipped under her door, suggested a clandestine meeting. Miss Marple's reticule held the locket, hairpin, and letters from earlier discoveries, each a piece of the puzzle she was determined to solve. A rustle in the reeds made them tense. A figure emerged, cloaked and hooded, moving with purpose toward the mill's sagging door. Miss Marple's heart quickened as she recognized the slight frame Clara Reed. Moments later, another shadow appeared, taller and hesitant. Thomas Vane, his notebook clutched like a talisman. The two exchanged hushed words, too faint to hear, before slipping inside. Miss Marple motioned to Lady Beatrice, and they edged closer, crouching beneath a shattered window. Clara's voice, sharp with urgency, drifted out. "You shouldn't have come, Thomas. If they find out, we're both finished." Thomas's reply was low, strained. "I know what you're planning, Clara. Ellen trusted you, and now she's dead. Tell me the truth, or I'll go to the constable." Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her reticule, her mind racing. Before Clara could respond, a piercing scream shattered the night, coming from within the mill. Miss Marple acted swiftly, pulling Lady Beatrice toward the door. "Quickly, Beatrice, we must intervene." They burst into the mill, its interior a maze of dust and shadows, lit only by a flickering lantern. Clara stood frozen, her face pale, while Thomas knelt beside a crumpled figure, a young man, his clerical attire marking him as Peter Finch, the curate's assistant. He was trembling, clutching his arm where a shallow cut bled through his sleeve. A knife lay nearby, its blade glinting. "Miss Marple," Clara gasped, her eyes wide. "This isn't what it looks like. I found him. Like this." Thomas rose, his notebook falling open to reveal a Tennyson line. "She floated down to Camelot." He pointed at Clara. "She was here, waiting for someone. I followed her to stop her." Miss Marple's gaze swept the scene, noting the lanterns, placement, and a small leather journal beside Peter. "Enough accusations," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "Mr. Finch, can you tell us what happened?" Peter, his face ashen, stammered, I came to meet someone. They sent a note, said they had information about Mr. Grayson's death. Then someone attacked me in the dark. I didn't see who." Lady Beatrice, hovering by the door, clutched her pearls. "Jane, another Tennyson note. It's the killer again." Miss Marple picked up the journal, its pages filled with Peter's scrawled handwriting. One entry caught her eye. Grayson knew. Too much. He was blackmailing her. "I saw the payments." She turned to Peter, her expression mild but piercing. "Mr. Finch, you were spying on Mr. Grayson, weren't you? What did you see?" Peter's eyes darted to Clara, then away. I didn't mean any harm. Mr. Grayson was meeting someone. By the river, late at night. A woman. She gave him money, and he promised to keep quiet about something. I didn't know what, but I wrote it down." Clara's voice was sharp. "You're lying." "I never met Grayson." Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her mind was a steel trap. "Mr. Finch, who sent you the note to come here." Peter hesitated, then pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. It read, "Meet me at the mill, midnight. The truth about Grayson." It was unsigned, but the ink matched the blue smudge from Ellen's teacup in Chapter 1. Miss Marple tucked it away, her thoughts turning to Clara's evasiveness and Thomas's presence. "Constable Wren must be informed," she said, her tone firm. "But first, Mr. Finch, you'll come with us. You're not safe here." They escorted Peter to the manor, the night air cold against their faces. Constable Wren, summoned by a breathless messenger, arrived with his lantern, his face a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Miss Marple, what's this about?" "Another attack." "A thwarted one, Constable," she replied, handing him the journal. "Mr. Finch was spying on Mr. Grayson, who was involved in a blackmail scheme. The killer or someone protecting their secrets lured him here tonight." Peter, still clutching his arm, blurted, "I wasn't part of it. I just saw things Grayson meeting a woman, taking her money. I thought she was paying for silence about Ellen's death." Clara's face flushed, but she remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. Thomas, hovering nearby, spoke up. "Miss Marple, I came to confront Clara. I found a letter in Ellen's things, hinting at a secret she shared with someone from out of town. I thought it was Clara." Miss Marple's gaze softened, but her mind was relentless. "Mr. Vane, your devotion to Ellen is admirable, but your actions are reckless. Miss Reed, you've been less than forthcoming. Care to explain your presence at the mill?" Clara's jaw tightened. "I got a note too, telling me to come. I thought it was about my family's history here. That's all I'll say, Constable." Wren scribbled furiously, his helmet askew. "Notes, blackmail, Tennyson versus this is a proper mess. Miss Marple, what do we do with them?" "For now, keep Mr. Finch safe," she said, and watch Miss Reed closely. Mr. Vane, I suggest you stay in the village where we can find you. The mill has given us a piece of the puzzle, but it's not complete." As they returned to the manor, Lady Beatrice whispered, "Jane, blackmail. Could Grayson have been killed to silence him?" "Very likely, Beatrice," Miss Marple said, her reticule heavy with the journal and note. "Grayson's greed may have been his undoing, and Peter's spying put him in the killer's sights. But the woman he saw, who is she?" Manor's clock struck 1, its chimes echoing through the silent halls. Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting untouched as she turned the journal's pages. Another entry caught her eye. She wore a cloak, her face hidden. The money was for the meadow. The meadow, linked to the Harcourt scandal from Agnes's letters, suggested a deeper motive, one tying the victims to Linwood's past. "Beatrice," Miss Marple said, her voice low, "tomorrow we must visit the church records. If Grayson was blackmailing someone about the meadow, there may be documents to confirm it. And we'll need another tea, with Peter Finch included. His fear may loosen his tongue." Lady Beatrice nodded, her face pale. "Jane, you're weaving a net around this killer, aren't you?" "A net of truth, Beatrice," Miss Marple replied, her eyes bright with purpose. "And every secret we uncover tightens it." As the fire crackled, Miss Marple's mind traced the river's path. From Ellen's cottage to the mill, each crime a ripple in a larger current. The journal, the Tennyson verse, and Peter's confession were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and she was determined to see its pattern whole. Resolution: Peter Finch's confession exposes a blackmail scheme involving Mr. Grayson, linking the murders to a web of secrets about the Harcourt meadow, while Clara and Thomas's presence at the mill deepens the mystery, setting the stage for Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The loom of Fate Linwood's annual festival dawned with a deceptive cheer. The village square ablaze with bunting and the scent of fresh-baked pies. Laughter and fiddle music drifted through the air, but beneath the revelry lurked a shadow of fear cast by 4 violent acts: Ellen Carter's strangulation, Mr. Grayson's murder, Agnes Poole's drowning, and Sir Rowland Harcourt's near-fatal stabbing. Each crime bore the mark of Tennyson's, the Lady of Shalott, and the villagers whispered of a curse as they gathered for the festivities. Miss Jane Marple, standing by a stall of embroidered shawls, observed the crowd with her usual quiet acuity, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. Today, she sensed, the killer's next move would unfold amidst the chaos of celebration. Lady Beatrice Harcourt, her bonnet adorned with a sprig of lavender, fanned herself nervously. "Jane, it feels wrong to celebrate with a murderer among us. The whole village is on edge, and Mrs. Tuttle swears she saw a cloaked figure near the church again last night." Miss Marple's eyes, bright behind her spectacles, scanned the faces. In the square, farmers, shopkeepers, children clutching toffee apples. Festivals, Beatrice, bring secrets to the surface. People lower their guard amid merriment. We must watch closely, especially for our friends from Tickler Reed, Thomas Vane, and Peter Finch. The square buzzed with activity: a maypole, dance, a pea-judging contest, and a stall displaying Ellen Carter's tapestries, a poignant reminder of the first victim. Miss Marple paused by the stall, her fingers brushing a half-finished work depicting a night by a river, its threads eerily similar to Clara's tapestry. A scrap of paper, tucked into the frame, caught her eye. She unfolded it discreetly, reading, and moving through a mirror, clear. "Tennyson again," she murmured, tucking the note into her reticule. "The killer is bold, leaving clues in plain sight." Lady Beatrice gasped, her fan stalling. "Jane, another verse. Here, at the festival, it's as if they're taunting us. Taunting or guiding, Miss Marple said softly. This line speaks of clarity, of seeing truly. Perhaps the killer wants us to look closer. Her gaze fell on Thomas Vane, who stood near the maypole, his poet's eyes shadowed with unease. He was speaking to Peter Finch, the curate's assistant, whose arm was still bandaged from the mill attack. Clara Reed, meanwhile, lingered by the pie stall, her grey dress blending with the crowd, but her restless glances betraying her. Miss Marple noted their proximity, a triangle of suspicion in the festive throng. "Beatrice," she said, "let's join Mr. Vane and Mr. Finch. A friendly chat may loosen tongues." They approached the maypole, where ribbons fluttered in the breeze. Thomas's face tightened as he saw them, his notebook clutched tightly. Peter, pale and jittery, offered a weak smile. "Miss Marple, Lady Beatrice," Thomas said, his voice strained. "I didn't expect to see you here, with everything." Miss Marple's smile was disarming. "Festivals are for community, Mr. Vane, even in dark times. You were close to Ellen. Does her tapestry stir memories?" Thomas's fingers twitched, his eyes darting to the stall. "It's painful to see her work. She poured her soul into it. That night she said it was her vision of truth." Peter shifted uncomfortably, his bandage stark against his black sleeve. "Ellen was kind to me," he mumbled. "She didn't deserve this." Miss Marple's gaze softened, but her mind was relentless. "Mr. Finch, you mentioned Mr. Grayson's blackmail. Did Ellen ever speak of secrets she shared with him, or perhaps with Miss Reed?" Peter's eyes widened, his voice a whisper. "Ellen, she knew something about the Harcourts. She told me once, in the church, that the meadow wasn't theirs by right. I didn't think much of it until Grayson started acting strange." Thomas's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, his notebook now tucked under his arm. Miss Marple noted the gesture, her thoughts turning to the note from the mill. "Mr. Vane," she said, "you've been quiet about Ellen's secrets, yet you followed Clara to the mill. Why?" Thomas's face flushed, his voice low. "I thought Clara was using Ellen, dragging her into something dangerous. I found a letter Ellen wrote. She was afraid of someone from out of town. I assumed it was Clara." Miss Marple's reticule felt heavy with Clusie, the locket, the hairpin, the coded tapestry message. Before she could press further, a shout rose from the crowd. Constable Wren pushed through, his helmet askew, holding a small, blood-stained book. "Miss Marple," he called, "we found this in the church vestry, hidden under a pew. It's Tennyson's poems, with blood on it." The crowd hushed, eyes turning to the constable. Miss Marple took the book, its cover worn but the blood fresh, smeared across a page open to the Lady of Shalott. The stain obscured a single line, but the verse was familiar. "This blood," she said, her voice calm, "is it recent?" Wren nodded. "Dr. Whitby says it's no more than a day old. We think it's Agnes Poole's, from the river." Lady Beatrice clutched her fan. "Agnes's blood. Jane, this means the killer was in the church after her death." Miss Marple's mind raced, connecting the blood-stained book to Peter's spying, Thomas's obsession, and Clara's secrecy. "Constable, was anything else found with it?" Wren shook his head. "Just the book. But the vestry door was unlocked, which is odd. Peter usually locks it." Peter paled, his voice trembling. I locked it last night, I swear. Someone must have picked it." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, but her tone remained gentle. "Mr. Finch, You've been close to these crimes, spying on Grayson, attacked at the mill, and now this book in your vestry. Care to explain?" Peter's hands shook, his words tumbling out. "I'm not the killer. I found that book yesterday. After the festival preparations, it was already stained. I hid it, thinking it would cause panic. I didn't know whose blood it was." Thomas stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You hid evidence. You knew Ellen was connected to this, didn't you?" Peter recoiled, his eyes darting to Clara, who had drifted closer, her face unreadable. "I didn't know anything," he cried. I was scared." Miss Marple raised a hand, silencing the exchange. "Enough, gentlemen. Constable, take Mr. Finch to the station for a full statement. Mr. Vane, I suggest you stay where we can find you, Miss Reed. A word, if you please." The crowd parted as Wren led Peter away, whispers rising like a tide. Clara faced Miss Marple, her chin lifted defiantly. "What now, Miss Marple? Another accusation?" "Not an accusation," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but firm. "A question. The blood on this book matches Agnes's, yet it was found in the vestry where you've been seen lingering, and your tapestry's code led us to the mill. Are you protecting someone?" Clara's eyes flickered, but she shook her head. "I'm protecting myself. I came to Linwood to learn about my family, not to kill. If you think I'm hiding a murderer, you're wrong." Miss Marple noted the tremor in Clara's voice, filing it away. "Very well, but secrets, Miss Reed, have a way of unraveling." As Clara walked away, Lady Beatrice whispered, "Jane, do you believe her? And Peter, hiding that book, could he be the killer?" "Not the killer, perhaps," Miss Marple said, "but complicit in his silence. The blood-stained book suggests another hand at work, someone who handled it after Agnes's death." Thomas Vane's anger, Clara's evasiveness, and Peter's fear are all threads in the same weave. They returned to the manor as the festival wound down, the square emptying under a twilight sky. Miss Marple sat by the window, the Tennyson volume in her lap, its bloodstain a stark reminder of the violence haunting Linwood. She turned its pages, finding a faint pencil mark beside another verse. "The curse is come upon me." "Beatrice," she said, her knitting needles resuming their rhythm, "tomorrow we must search the church records for more on the meadow dispute, and we'll need another tea with Clara, Thomas, and Sir Rowland. The killer is growing bolder, and we must be bolder still." Lady Beatrice nodded, her face pale. "Jane, you're closing in, aren't you?" "I can feel it." "I'm merely following the threads, Beatrice," Miss Marple said, her eyes bright with purpose. "And there, leading us to a truth as clear as a mirror, and as dangerous. Resolution: the discovery of the blood-stained Tennyson volume, linked to Agnes Poole's murder, suggests a second culprit working with Thomas Vane, deepening the mystery and pointing to a conspiracy, setting the stage for the final confrontation in Chapter 8. Chapter 8. The final verse. The twilight draped Linwood in a hush, the village's lanterns flickering like stars against the gathering dark. 7 days of Terrorellin Carter's strangulation, Mr. Grayson's murder, Agnes Poole's drowning, Sir Rowland's stabbing, and Peter Finch's narrow escape had left the villagers clinging to the fragile hope of the annual festival's end. Each crime bore the haunting mark of Tennyson's The Lady of Shalott, and the whispers of a curse had grown to a clamour. Miss Jane Marple, standing in the shadowed nave of St. Cuthbert's Church, arranged a circle of chairs with deliberate care, her knitting bag at her side. Tonight She would weave the final threads of the mystery into a net to trap the killer. Lady Beatrice Harcourt, her face pale beneath a laced cap, fidgeted by the altar. Jane, this feels like a stage play, inviting everyone to the church after dark, with that forged Tennyson note it's bold, even for you. Are you sure it'll work? Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, gleamed with quiet confidence. The killer thrives on Tennyson's verses, Beatrice. A fabricated line, the curse is come upon me, will draw them out. Guilt is a restless guest, and our suspects are uneasy. The church door creaked, admitting Constable Wren, his lantern casting long shadows. Behind him came the invited guests. Thomas Vane, his poet's face taut with strain. Clara read, her grey dress stark against the pews. Peter Finch, his bandaged arm trembling. And Sir Rowland Harcourt, his cane tapping a defiant rhythm. Last to arrive was Edward Harcourt, Lady Beatrice's nephew, a lean man with sharp features, and eyes that darted like a fox's. Miss Marple had insisted on his presence, her instincts stirred by his absence from earlier scenes. "Thank you for coming," Miss Marple said, her voice warm but firm, as if hosting a parish tea. "Has suffered greatly, and tonight we seek the truth." A new Tennyson verse was found in the vestry this morning. The curse has come upon me. It suggests the killer is among us. A murmur rippled through the group. Thomas's hand tightened on his notebook. Clara's lips parted in a silent protest, and Peter shrank back. Edward's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, his fingers brushing a silver watch chain. Miss Marple continued, her gaze sweeping the circle. "Let's begin with Ellen Carter. She wove a tapestry of truth, revealing a Harcourt Scandaler meadow, stolen from her family and the Reeds. Her death, marked by she left the web, she left the loom, silenced her voice." Clara's face flushed. "I told you, I barely knew Ellen. My family left Linwood years ago." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her words were steel. "Yet your locket was found in the orchard, Miss Reed, and your tapestry held a coded message for a mill meeting. You came to Linwood seeking justice for your family, didn't you?" Clara's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Yes, but not murder. I wanted proof of the theft, nothing more." Miss Marple turned to Peter. "Mr. Finch, you saw Mr. Grayson taking money from a woman by the river. You thought it was Clara, but Grayson's diary spoke of a forbidden gaze. He was blackmailing someone with power, someone desperate to keep the Meadow scandal buried." Peter stammered, I didn't know who it was, I swear." Sir Rowland's cane struck the floor. "This is outrageous. My father's dealings were lawful. You're dredging up old lies, Miss Marple." "Not lies," Miss Marple said softly, producing the blood-stained Tennyson volume from her reticule. "Agnes Poole's blood marks this book, found in the vestry. She was researching the Meadow dispute, and her death outflew the web and floated wide, silenced her. But the blood suggests another hand, someone who handled it after her murder." Thomas's voice was hoarse. "You think I did it? I loved Ellen. I'd never hurt her." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her mind was relentless. "Your love was real, Mr. Vane, but twisted by obsession. You wrote those Tennyson verses, didn't you? To frame the murders as a curse, to hide your motive avenging Ellen's family by targeting those who knew the Harcourt secret." Thomas's face crumpled, his notebook falling open to reveal pages of Tennyson, some smeared with ink matching Ellen's teacup. I wrote the notes, yes. Ellen told me about the Harcourts, how they ruined her family. I wanted justice, but I didn't. Kill her, then who did? Constable Wren demanded, his lantern swaying. Miss Marple turned to Edward Harcourt, who had remained silent, his watch chain glinting. Mr. Harcourt, you've been absent from our inquiries, yet your family's shame is at the heart of this. The Meadow scandal threatened your inheritance. Ellen, Grayson, and Agnes knew too much, and Sir Rowland's attack was a warning. You were Grayson's blackmailer, weren't you? And when he demanded more, you silenced him. Edward's laugh was sharp, but his eyes betrayed panic. Preposterous. I was in London during the murders, ask anyone. London is a short train ride, Miss Marple said, her voice calm but unyielding. Your watch chain matches the clay on Sir Rowland's coat from the riverbank. And Peter saw a cloaked figure, not a woman, but a man, paying Grayson. You worked with Thomas, didn't you? He wrote the verses, you committed the murders, ensuring the Harcourt name remained untarnished. Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Edward, my own nephew. Edward's composure cracked, his voice rising. The heart built Linwood. I wouldn't let a weaver, a curate, or a librarian ruin us. Grayson was greedy, Agnes was nosy, and Ellen She was going to publish her tapestry, exposing everything. Thomas lunged forward, his eyes wild. You said we'd scare them, Edward, not kill them. I wrote the notes to make it look like a curse, but you took it too far. Constable Wren seized Edward's arm, his face grim. That's enough, Mr. Harcourt. You're coming with me. Miss Marple raised a hand, her voice steady. One moment, Constable. Mr. Vane, you followed Clara to the mill, thinking she was the threat. But it was Edward you should have feared. His knife struck Peter, and his hand left the blood on the Tennyson book. Clara, silent until now, spoke, her voice trembling. I came to find the truth about my family's land. I didn't know Edward was behind it. I thought Thomas was the killer. Miss Marple's gaze softened. You were a distraction, Miss Reed, but an honest one. Your tapestry's code was a plea for help, not a plan for murder. Edward struggled in Wren's grip, his voice a snarl. You can't prove anything. It's all conjecture. Miss Marple produced the hairpin from Agnes's riverbank, the locket from the orchard, and the coded tapestry sketch. These, and the church records I checked this morning, confirm the meadow was stolen. Your greed and fear, Edward, wove this. Tragedy. Thomas's verses gave it a poetic mask. The church fell silent, the weight of truth settling like dust. Wren handcuffed Edward, while Thomas, broken, sank into a chair, confessing his role in the notes. Clara, exonerated, stood apart, her eyes wet with relief. Sir Rowland, his face ashen, muttered, I didn't know. I swear. Lady Beatrice clutched Miss Marple's arm. Jane, you've done it. The village is safe. Miss Marple's smile was weary but content. Safe, Beatrice, but scarred. Human nature is a tangled thread. Love, greed, fear. We must weave carefully. As Wren led the culprits away, the villagers gathered outside, their lanterns a constellation of hope. Miss Marple stepped into the night, her knitting bag light now, the mystery resolved. The Harcourt scandal would be aired, the meadow returned to its rightful heirs. Linwood would heal, its secrets no longer deadly. She paused by the river, its waters calm under the moon. The Lady of Shallot's curse was no more only human failings, laid bare by a spinster's keen eye. Miss Marple turned toward the manor, her work done, ready to return to St. Mary Mead. where other threads awaited resolution. Edward Harcourt and Thomas Vane are revealed as the killers, driven by greed and vengeance to protect the Harcourt name. The Meadow scandal is exposed, all Cluse locket, hairpin, blood-stained book, coded tapestry are explained, and Linwood is restored to peace with no loose ends.